Won't surrender faith is like a fire that never bursts to embers. The voice of the unheard. Love is the answer.
I gotta speak it, believe it, that's how I feel inside.
I can't sit here quiet.
You can take my heart, you can take my breath when you pry it from the cold dead chest.
This is how we rise up. Heavy as a hurricane, louder than a freight train. This is how we rise up. Heart is beating faster, feels like thunder. Magic static, call me a fanatic. It's our world, they can never have it. This is how we rise up. It's our resistance, you can't resist us. Can you hear me? Are you listening? Sleeping and the shadows could be making history. Through the fire, on the water, used to be a slave, but now you are a conqueror.
They can take my heart, they can take my breath when they pry it from the cold dead chest.
This is how we rise up. Heavy as a hurricane, louder than a freight train. This is how we rise up. Heart is beating faster, feels like thunder. Magic static, call me a fanatic. It's our world, they can never have it. This is how we rise up. It's our resistance, you can't resist us. We're rising up, rising up, we're rising up, rising up, we're rising up. This is how we rise up. It's our resistance, you can't resist us. This is how we rise up. Heavy as a hurricane, louder than a freight train. This is how we rise up. Heart is beating faster, feels like thunder. Magic static, call me a fanatic. It's our world, they can never have it. This is how we rise up. It's our resistance, you can't resist us.
And you can't believe it. that just as we're coming on air, the camera system goes down. Only now does that kind of crap happen. But the show must go on. So, I don't know why I'm getting this amazing echo in my ears. There it goes. How about that now? Okay, now I don't hear myself because it just keeps coming back. I'm going to throw this up there for now because I've got to have something up there. But I am Joe Vollano. I am your host, your guiding light, back again. It is now about that time. We are done with Labor Day. We are done with all the nonsense before, and we're going to get into some serious business today, and that is getting into the election cycle that's coming up. We're going to talk about a bunch of different things. We're going to start local, and if we have enough time, we'll get to national stuff. But, you know, I like to keep this show nice and local. We'll talk about some local issues. We'll talk about the state issues. A lot has happened since the last time we've been here. So let's dive right into it. Now, again, like I said, there's a lot of stuff going on. We're going to talk about the overall election polls, which, I do not believe. And I don't think anyone else should either, because I think they're a lot wider apart than what they say. We have a new city manager in the city of Meriden. So you know we have to talk about that. And the senior center debacle, which again, I don't know if why anyone would be surprised that the senior center project has turned into you know what, because it has. And it's not surprising because you look at the players that are involved, the city's involved, that's a dead giveaway that it's going to be screwed up. And of course it was. Because I don't know how anyone didn't realize that there's a $10 million project that needs to be done, and they're 2 years in advance. They're 2 years behind. So how the Flood Commission was not talking to the senior, again, these are all city agencies. I am not surprised, but it is what it is, and we're going to talk about it tonight. But like I said before, I am your host, Joe Vollano. Unfortunately, you cannot see me tonight, but I promise next week you will. We are back. We'll be back every Sunday, 7 o'clock. You know, we go all the way through. And again, this show only works best when you are involved. So get involved. Be part of the show. You give me a call, 203-805-2520. We'll talk about anything you want. Email straighttalkjv@gmail.com, or you could jump onto the message board and go from there. For some reason, I tell you, man, I very odd today with what is going on with my computer system here. It's very odd because I'm not seeing a lot of stuff coming up. I just updated everything today, but we will see. Let's continue on with the show, though. Okay, so let's talk about rescue funds. I'm going to try to bite my tongue a little bit here tonight because I have to. So if no one heard that $1.1 million is going to Gallery 53, $323,000 for a roof, which actually $323,000 is probably more than what the building is worth. But not only that, they have now approved $789,000 for a new elevator. Now, I'm sorry. $1.1 million of rescue funds going to one organization is highly distressing. And when I hear why these types of things are being passed, because you know, nobody wants to deal with this committee anymore. Nobody wants to deal with this money being out there. It absolutely blows my mind because people were now, for those of you who don't know how the rescue funds are being allocated, let me just run through it with you. If you want part of the money, you have to put in an application. The application goes to a steering committee. And that steering committee will review the applications and it will determine whether or not it is approved to go before the city council to be for final approval. Now, these people are all volunteered. Now, again, they all volunteered to be on this committee. All these counselors volunteered to run for city office. They volunteered to be a representation of you and to be a good steward of your money. That apparently doesn't matter anymore because they're too busy wanting to get this done and over with. They don't want to be burdened with more meetings on rescue fund dollars. So they're just approving anything. They're just approving anything. And this is what counselors are saying, is that they just don't want to be bothered anymore. We're just going to pass it. To me, that doesn't sound like good stewardship of our tax dollars. And no matter what they say, whether they're rescue funds or this, it's all our tax dollars. All of it. And it should be treated as such. It should be treated as if it was their own. But it's not. And that's a serious problem. Because if they're not doing that, what else aren't they looking after for us? Are these the reasons why we have so many issues in the city? Is this the reason why? Is this the mentality that's going on in our city government, which is allowing departments to run wild as they have for decades? Because apparently nobody seems to want to be bothered anymore. If you don't want to be bothered, why did you run for office? Why did you volunteer to be on committees? I tell you, it irritates me to no end. But this is what we're dealing with now. And now, Gallery 53, whose building isn't worth $300,000, just got $1.1 million for a new roof and a new elevator. When you have the American Legion, you have local restaurants that have all been approved, but haven't gotten their money. We have all this money that's allocated that's just been sitting there because the red tape, there's so much red tape of trying to get this stuff out. And in the meantime, all these projects are going up and up in costs. I mean, you have the American Legion, just for one, who was approved, what, a year ago? 2 years ago? Still hasn't seen the money. And the cost of that project has almost doubled already. So now they're never going to get that job done because they're not going to have the funds for it. And there are countless other organizations and small businesses that are in that same boat. But to hear elected officials tell me that they just don't want to be bothered with it anymore is highly distressing. It's not good leadership. And if they don't want to be there, they should resign. I don't care what side of the aisle it is. If you don't want to be there to do the work of the people that voted you in, step aside. Just step aside. There are people that will take care of it for you. But to just throw our money away and then say, well, it's not technically city money, it's federal money. It's still our tax dollars. every single dollar that the government takes in, they take it from an individual. So I would check with your counselors to see how they voted on that and ask them why. Now, this next thing, I have a feeling we have a new city manager in town. And again, he's not new to the city. Been here most of his life, if not all of his life, except for when he went to college. But Brian Daniels is our new city manager. Now, I had a lot of reservations, and I'll be the first to admit. Now, unfortunately, the camera, for some reason, is not coming up. So it must have been a new update on the camera software or the vMix, the system I use, but no video. It's all right. You know what I look like. You all know what I look like. You guys can just close your eyes and just imagine it as we're going along. So Brian Daniels, who is a former councilman and former council majority leader on the city council, is yeah, I do have a face for radio. Is our new city manager. Now, I think he's highly overpaid. I think $185,000 is ridiculous. He should have been brought in around $165,000, $170,000. But that being what it is, I'm not going to dwell on that. I had a lot of reservations because I know Brian Daniels, and I know that he's going to cost us a lot of money when it comes to city projects, because Brian Daniels is a heavy union supporter, which means very heavy PLA supporter, which, if anyone knows, I am not a fan of. And me and him had this out in 2015 during a race where I ran against him, and we only lost by like 40 something votes. But the big deal of what was going on that year was the PLA, the Project Labor Agreement, and the Maloney High School rebuild. And again, because of Brian Daniel, they had to rebid out the project, and the labor side of the project cost us $18 million more. So while in theory and technically he didn't cost us $18 million, he cost us $18 million in quality of product. So as I always say, we bought ourselves a Ferrari and we got ourselves a Pinto. Because then under the Guy Scaife administration, we had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars fixing the cheap products and replacing the cheap products that they use, especially in the HVAC system over at Maloney. So the city got screwed, and a lot of people were not happy with Brian Daniels. Now, I will give credit where credit is due. Brian Daniels is a hell of a lawyer, and the city is lucky to have him at $190,000. You know, I was just having this conversation with someone else driving back from bringing Joseph back to school. And I said, you know, if one good thing out of anything for coming with Brian Daniels is the frivolous lawsuits are not going to happen. Brian Daniels knows how to do things in a way that is going to limit risk and exposure of the city. So I will give him that. On the other hand, again, he's going to cost us more money on other things. But, you know, I keep my ear very close to the ground when it comes to the city. And especially within City Hall. And I'm always trying to find out what's going on behind the scenes in City Hall. Hold on a minute. And from what I'm hearing with Brian Daniels has shocked me. And again, I believe I'm wrong many times. But I'm willing to be wrong on this. And I'm willing to eat my words when it comes to Bryan Daniels. Now, I'm not going to do that quite yet. We're not at that point yet. We're not at that point where I'm going to sit there and praise him just yet. I will say I like the things he is doing. I like the approach he is taking with city department heads. I like what he's doing in the research of how the city is actually being run and where the money is going. So as of right now, I'm actually a little excited to see where Bryan Daniels goes with this. And to see if he is going to be that, listen, this is my city. I grew up here. I'm vested here. And I'm going to take the politics out of it. And I'm doing what's best for each and every resident of the city. As of right now, it's looking very promising. Looking very promising. I did grow up in East Haven. What does that got to do with anything? Or did you come in late and not know what's going on and you just decide to ask? Yes, I grew up in East Haven. Good old Staven. But so I'm really excited to see where this goes. Because I'm from what I'm hearing, Bryan Daniels is really starting to dig into where the money's going and how the city and how the operations are going. Scott, who said I grew up in Meriden? Are you coming in late and then not knowing what is going on here? Go back to sleep. Go back to sleep. No one's talking about me growing up in Meriden or East Haven. Those people. So again, I think no one said I grew up in Meriden. Bryan Daniels did. Go back to sleep. So I think that I think we're in for some good things with Bryan Daniels. And again, I'm going to be the first to admit when I'm wrong. So if I'm wrong, I'm going to let you guys know. But right now, I'm saying I can be. But we're going to let this play out. We'll see what happens. So again, but of course, we all had our issues with how much he was getting paid right off the bat. But again, we do have a Harvard lawyer now. And again, if we look at that, what it costs per hour to hire a Harvard lawyer, I think we might be okay. I still would have liked to have seen a national search. So, listen, he's a politician. Of course he's a good guy when you meet him. Trust me, Brendan, wait till the day you cross him. then you'll see the real Bryan Daniels. You'll see the real Bryan Daniels. Bryan Daniels does not like Republicans. That's just straight out. And again, and that's fine. If we're talking political, me and Brian, I'll debate Bryan Daniels all day long on a political stance. But he's not in a political. Let me rephrase that. He's not supposed to be in a political environment now. Now he is representing every single citizen of Meriden. And he's supposed to be the steward of our money. That's what he is hired to do. He is supposed to run this organization, this city, in a responsible, efficient, and productive way. And if he can do that, that should transcend politics. So, I mean, I remember the first time I met Bryan Daniels. Yes, he's a nice guy. First time I ever met Bryan Daniels was at a golf commission meeting because he was a Republican. He was a council liaison. And I thought he was a good guy too. Until you crossed him. Until you disagreed with him. And then he turns into bulldog lawyer. And he'll come. And he'll attack. And that's fine. On a political stance, that's fine. But his position is no longer political. At least it's not supposed to be. And I'm hoping that he's going to do the right thing. And from what I've seen so far, I'm going to give credit where credit is due. As of right now, I am going to admit that I am somewhat wrong. But again, we're very early in his tenure here as city manager, and we'll see where it goes. So there's a couple things I want to talk about on a state level. Let me not get to state stuff yet, because there is one more thing I did, but I'm gonna move around here on my agenda here, and we're gonna talk senior center. So, and again, this is where, the good old city of Meriden comes shining through. As anyone could have predicted, that this project was going to go sideways one way or another, and it did. And it went sideways because of the lack of communication within the city government. That's basically all it is. It's not like this stuff wasn't known already, but for some reason, these organizations, the flood control, engineering, the senior centers, and apparently the mayor's office and the city manager's office, obviously weren't communicating with each other. How is that possible? I have no idea. How no one knew that they had to dredge and replace soil that was going to cost an extra $10 million. Nobody knew about it. Again, these are the type of things that Brian Daniels, now as city manager, is going to be responsible for. And I'm hoping that it will be run better. Because, again, I know Brian Daniels is not a stupid person. Brian Daniels is not an idiot. And I got to imagine, being a trial lawyer for corporate litigation, he's pretty well organized. I'm making that assumption. You don't get to be in the level where he is outside of the public sector or in the private sector being unorganized and stupid. You just don't do it. Not at that level. So, now the one problem I do have, now again, I definitely think, there's totally lack of communication between departments because they're all doing their own thing. But again, and I'm gonna give Brian Daniels the benefit of the doubt right now, because again, he wasn't even there yet, I don't believe, during your grand opening, which again was a good time. I enjoyed myself tremendously, meeting a lot of new people over at the Meriden Pride Community Center. That's the one over on Paddock Avenue. But I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he wasn't there yet to be in communications with all these different departments. But now he is. So, but it's water under the bridge, no pun intended, that this project's going to have to be, at least, let me refer the building committee team is going to need to be disbanded for 2 years. And because nothing's going to get done for at least 2 years on the senior center. Now, I will agree that we don't want to forego this project. But I said this earlier when they picked that location, that you have to have a contingency plan. You have to have another location to go to. And this is exactly it. A $10 million increase in this project. This project is now going to cost the city $60 million. $60 million for a senior center / health center. That is way too much. Unless the state, which again, I've talked about this project an awful lot up in Hartford in the time I've been up there during this campaign cycle. And myself and a lot of Republicans have had this discussion, and they're all for trying to help us get the money for this project. But $60 million is going to be a very hard sell. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. Because the Democrats, who have full operation up there and represent us here in Meriden, has gotten us absolutely zero from the state, which is pathetic. Your own party will not help you get a bill passed to get money to the city of Meriden so we could build a new senior center? Republicans are full-fledged on board to do this. Not at $60 million. Not at $60 million. It's too much. And I'm going to respectfully disagree with Bruce Fontanello, who during in the article, he said all the other sites were rejected for one reason or another. Yeah, the only reason why is because you guys didn't want to do it there. You could have had Westfield, but the city didn't want to pay $1.1 million for it. It's costing you how much for Cook Ave? It would have been a hell of a lot cheaper over at Westfield. We could have put a bid in for Sears. You could have taken over Sears Automotive. You could have made a nice big courtyard there. They just redid that entire area over there with the flood project. You had ample space to do there. And let's face it. Let's be honest with each other. The mall is dying. The mall is, I don't know what step further. The mall is dead. The mall is dead. Over the next 10 years, that's simply going to turn into a medical facility. We all know it. Yale's making a play for it. Hartford's making a play for it. All these medical companies are going to make a play for the Meriden Mall. Stores are leaving left and right. Now, I will sit there and say this. My favorite store in the mall, Romani's, where I get every suit I own, every suit, every bow tie, every tie, every jacket I have, comes from Romani's. And I'm super psyched that Romani's is moving up to East Main Street. I can't wait for them to open. Sanjay, I'm just dying for you guys to open there so I can get in there and see what you got. But again, it's another store out of the mall. The food court is a desert. That's the realities we face. But the city could have made a play on that for the senior center. Maybe we could find more spots for the senior center. But to sit there and say that no options were feasible is a lie, is a straight out lie. They were. You guys just didn't want to explore that because you guys were so fixated on Cook. Again, Cook is a fabulous location. It's not worth $60 million. I'm sorry. And for Daniels and the mayor to say we just need to push forward, no. You need to stop. Right now is the time for cool heads to pause and reassess. You don't just push forward. You're talking about taxpayer money, a lot of it, millions of dollars. You don't just push forward. You do the responsible thing. You pause. You reassess. Reevaluate your goals. And then plan a move forward. We're not just going to push forward. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But again, coming from the leadership in this city, I'm not surprised at it. Because unfortunately, and I've said this many times before, our city leadership does not think long term, they think short term. How can we get this going? How can we just do it? Just do it and don't worry about it. We'll deal with the consequences later. We'll deal with the issues later. And that's how we got into this whole mess. It's because no one did take a second when they decided to start this project. No one did take a second to sit there and pause and say, hey, let's make sure all of our ducks are in a row. Because they clearly weren't. And once again, we're stuck with the short end of the stick when we could have had a couple different locations that we could have moved to. So, the project's not dead. I know they have a meeting coming up on the 16th. Hopefully they have some new options. Even though if really I don't need a crystal ball to tell you what is actually going to be done, which is basically nothing. And they're going to sit there and say, well, we're just going to disband for 2 years. And we're just going to reconvene in 2 years and we'll just continue moving forward, wasting your tax dollars. Because that's what they do best. So, speaking of wasting our money and dragging us through all this nonsense, let's talk energy prices. Let's talk electricity, because it is the one thing I've been meeting with people all over the place, especially obviously running for state rep, in Meriden, Cheshire, and Southington. I talk to a lot of people. And the biggest thing I always hear is, damn Eversource. And my first question always is, why damn Eversource? And the first thing I get is, well, look at these public benefits that we have to pay. Look at these rate increases we're paying. Look how much we're paying for electricity. And I ask the question, and it seems to dumbfound people when I ask it. And I'm like, why screw Eversource and not screw those at the state capitol? And they're like, well, Eversource is robbing us, and the state is going to go into special session and take care of it. Ladies and gentlemen, if I have tried to teach you guys anything over the last, 4 years of doing this show, I have tried to teach you how to read the stitches on a fastball or a curveball as it's coming at you. Now, most people are going to have the reaction that every person that has come up to me about Eversource and the electricity rates is having. Screw Eversource. They're the ones to blame. And they're shocked when I turn around and say, no, they're not. And they look at me like I'm crazy. Those, and I'm going to say Democrats, because this isn't a Republican thing. Democrats up at the state legislators, the executive order from Governor Lamont. If you want to put the blame on a single individual for most of it, is Governor Lamont. Governor Lamont, during COVID, placed an executive order on electric companies that they cannot, under any circumstance, disconnect electrical customers. And that people could skip out on their bills. He basically gave everybody in this state a free option to just say, hey, I'm not paying my electricity bills anymore. Because that's what people did. And now, Eversource is like, well, look at all this money we lost. Look at all this money we lost. What are we going to do? So, of course, what do you think any business is going to do? They're going to go to Pure and say, hey, we have $873 million to recover, and that's just Eversource. UI was another $356 million. So now you're talking about $1.2 million in electricity bills that the public just didn't pay. So, of course, the company is going to be like, we can't eat $1.2 billion. So they went to Pura. And again, these companies had a legitimate gripe. They had a good grievance. We need to make up this money because the state mandated, and that's the key word. With that executive order, the state mandated that Eversource give their products away for free. Listen, if they turn around and said, Joe, you got to give oil away for free, and that's going to be mandated, they don't have to pay for it, you bet your ass I'm going after somebody. And Eversource and the UI did. They went after the state because, again, it was an executive order by Governor Lamont. So the state should be responsible for it. Now remember, the state got $2.6 billion. The state of Connecticut got $2.6 billion in federal rescue plans. You're trying to tell me that the state legislators, so all of the Democrats that are sitting there saying, grab your pitchforks and go after Eversource, you're trying to tell me that they couldn't take $1.2 billion and pay for the product for the program that they implemented? Why should a business have to eat it? Why should your 401ks have to eat it? Because I guarantee you this. I bet if you look into your 401k and your stocks, I bet Eversource is in there. I bet their parent company is in your 401k. But this is what politicians do. They turn around, they pass these ridiculous executive orders or bills, and then they turn around and say, and businesses are bad. Businesses aren't paying their fair share. Businesses are trying to take advantage of you. Because they're the bad guys. Don't look at us who's mandating it to them. Don't look at us. We're the good guys. We're the good guys. You didn't have to pay your bills because of us. But if you're one of those people that paid your electricity bill every single month, your gripe is not with Eversource. Your gripe is with the state legislator. That's where your gripe's at. Your gripe's with the governor's office. That's where your gripe is. Don't be fooled by the smoke and mirrors. Don't be fooled by slick politicians turning around and saying, well, we're just helping everybody out during the pandemic. If you were, you would have paid for this program. Because now everyone that did the right thing is now taking it up the rear end. And that's not right. You know, we have a lot of senior citizens that are on fixed incomes. And we talk about it every election cycle. Every election cycle we talk about seniors. And how they desperately need help. Do you know the state of Connecticut is only one of 13 states? And I didn't know this until I was talking to one of my customers. And he's like, do you know they tax my Social Security? And I'm like, no way. We're one of only 13 states in the country that tax Social Security income. So if you're on a fixed income and you get Social Security every month, that is taxed. That is one of the biggest things I'm going to Hartford for. That's going to be bill number one that I put forth is ending Social Security income tax. It is ridiculous. It's an insult to every senior in this state. And I can't believe I didn't know about this sooner. No senior in this state should be paying taxes on Social Security income. We're already paying enough. I mean, just imagine between inflation, food costs, electrical costs, I mean, all these different things. Rent has gone through the roof, which we're going to get into even more of that. All these things. And now, the state is passing even more mandatory charges to the electrical company for electric cars, which that one just passed. So now, for everybody that doesn't have an electric car, the EV charging program is going to be a tax $140 million. $140 million. So that they could build and give incentives for charging stations. Listen, I'm all for clean energy. I'm all for you owning an electric car. Knock yourself out. Listen, I almost got one myself. My son didn't want it. I was all for it. But I don't expect anyone else to pay or to give me an incentive to sit there and put a charging station at my house. Or it's not up to me to sit there and help pay for charging stations around the state. If you want to have that kind of charge, add it to the sales of electric cars. Why should it be on the burden of people that don't have electric cars? There are a lot of people that just don't want an electric car. So why are they being forced to pay for it? So if you want to spend $140 million on electric charging stations, go for it. But add the cost of that to electric car sales. Hell, they're getting huge discounts as it is. You could add an extra $1,000 onto every electric car sold, and you'll still be, what, $8,000 to $9,000 worth of discounts? The federal government is giving you a $7,500 discount already. Incentive on buying an electric car. The state's giving you one. The dealership's giving you some. By the time all was said and done, it was almost $11,000 to $12,000 in incentives to buy an electric car. And you're trying to tell me that you need everybody else in the state to pay for electric charging stations? I don't think so. Take $1,000 off of that incentive and move it over to your charging station fund that you want. There is no way we should be paying for it. You want to have an electric car? Have an electric car. Knock yourself out. Don't force everyone else who doesn't want one to pay for it. So, we have something new in the state this year, and that's early voting. So early voting is starting October 21st. So for those of you who don't know, early voting will be at City Hall. And I forget the hours. I had it at one point on my screen and I accidentally shut it off. So it is October 21st is when it starts. I'm taking it's going to be during business hours of City Hall, I got to imagine, 9 to 5. But I'll verify that and get it to you next week. Because obviously... Now, I always said, this has been a hotly debated issue over the years, really for the last decade. And this is like a Democrat dream to have, 14 days of voting. To me, the more days you have, the more open you are, the more susceptible you are to fraud and cheating. That's my take on it. Same thing with absentee ballots. Absentee ballots, the same thing. The more you have, the more likely you are to have some fraud. And look, Bridgeport is a prime example of that. You don't have to look far. Bridgeport, they were Democrats going after Democrats. And they cheated against each other. Imagine what they'll do against Donald Trump. Their hatred for that man is beyond anything I've ever seen in my life. So to think that they won't attempt to cheat, no, actually, it really doesn't. It really doesn't. So for those of you who can't see it, so it also allows for increased access and turnout. And if it does, it's for Republicans. Let me tell you that, especially in the city of Meriden. So let me break down those numbers for you, Brendan. So if you look at the statistics of who doesn't vote, when you look at those who can be persuaded, for Democrats, it's like 7.6%. You have about 7.6% that you most likely could get out during early voting. For Republicans, it's 16.7%. It's more than double. So if early voting is going to help anyone, it's going to help Republicans. And I've said this many a times. If you want to end early voting, Republicans, show up for early voting. If Democrats see that it's going to benefit Republicans, they'll end it the day after. It'll be gone. As soon as it benefits us, it's done. But the whole point of early voting really ties into the immigration. And as most of you are probably sitting there scratching your heads like, Joe, how does that turn out? So what's really going on with immigration? There's a reason why the Harris and Biden administration is doing what they're doing. See, if you look what's going on over the last 8 years, the minorities in this country, i.e., African Americans and Hispanics, are starting to come over to the Republican side because they're sick and tired of being taken advantage of. So right now, and I've said this again, over the years, I've talked about what the Democrats need to survive. The Democrats need two things to survive. One, a permanent underclass. Those who are reliant on them to survive. And two, a media that is willing to carry water for them. Now, they already have one of those. The media. The media is willing to carry the water for Democrats to the ends of the earth. But what they don't have right now is a permanent underclass, i.e., poor, low middle income people. Because they are starting to say, we're being taken advantage of. We're going over to the Republican side. So, what do? They open the border. They just let it run wild. But see, they can't do that the whole time because now they got to win an election. So now they have to look like they're serious about the border. And in doing so, they are giving concrete evidence that what Donald Trump was doing was correct and was the right thing. And it worked. 6 months ago, you saw Joe Biden sign an executive order that reinstated Trump's immigration policy. And what did we see? You saw immediately border crossings go down. Harris admitted to it during the debate that we have had the lowest border crossing in the last 5 years. Yeah, because you implemented Donald Trump's policies again. But they had to do that because they know the number one issue affecting Americans today is immigration. So they got to look like they're strong on immigration right now. But really, the whole purpose of what they were doing for the last 3.5 years has worked because the end goal, and if you listen to any Democrat, they're like, well, we need them to be part of our society. We need them to have an access to becoming an American citizen. They should be able to vote. That's what this all comes down to. It's all about the vote. They need that new permanent underclass. And they got it with illegal immigrants who are just happy to be here. And they praise Joe Biden for opening the border. You don't think that if they get a driver's license and a utility bill that they won't be able to vote? Of course they will. We have dead people voting, for crying out loud. That's what illegal immigration is all about. It's what it's always ever been about. Is creating new voters. New voters that are dependent on the government, dependent on Democrats to take care of them. Look how that's turned out for every sanctuary city now. New York is going to be bankrupt in 2 years. Chicago. Look at all the crime going on in Colorado. Anyone who doesn't think that Colorado is not in play is missing the big picture of what's going on. That's why I said at the beginning of the show, I don't believe any of those polls. Those polls are absolute nonsense. When you start digging into the internals of it and seeing who they're actually asking, it's almost 65 to 70% Democrats. And those polls are still razor thin. And Harris has missed the last two big interviews. The last two big interviews. She did the one with Oprah, the one in Philly, to actually put some stuff out there, what she wants to do. She has nothing. Because she won't run the government. The same people that are running the government now under Joe Biden. Joe Biden is not running this government. We're in serious times here. And we need a serious leader to move this country forward. And anyone who thinks that Donald Trump simply saying that we're going to have a mass deportation, that's what's needed. Especially when we're talking about criminals. Again, look at Colorado. All these Venezuelan gangs. You think Harris is going to take care of that? Harris ain't taking care of that. Donald Trump's going to take care of that. You think that world leaders fear Kamala Harris? Really? They fear the shit out of Donald Trump. And right now, that's what's needed. You don't need to like his personality. You don't need to like the mean tweets, the sarcastic comments. We already have evidence. We look at Donald Trump's 4 years. Well, 3.5. Greatest economy ever. We look at Harris and Biden. This is why she can't even answer that question. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? She knows the answer is no. During the CNN, she's like, next question. Next question. She didn't want to answer it. And then when asked during the debate, oh, I came from a middle-class family. Shut up. Answer the question. Even in the interview with that Philadelphia reporter, again, say it gave the same generic, stupid answer, never addressed it. Because even she knows that she's not capable of answering that question. Honestly, at least. But we'll get into more of that next week. We're going to get into some of those policies. We're going to get the one that I'm really, really nervous for if she ever does take office is two things. One, price controls, because that's never worked in American history. Last time we tried that was under Nixon. And taxes, capital gains tax. She wants to go from 27 to 43%. And they want to tax uncollected. So, unrealized capital gains tax. And we'll get into more of the foreign policy next week. We'll talk about Ukraine. We'll talk about, Afghanistan, that whole debacle. And again, and what's going to be happening in China with China and Taiwan. That's coming soon. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't think that China's getting ready to go into Taiwan, it's coming. And I tell you what, if Donald Trump loses this election, it's going to be immediately right after the election is over. China's got to wait. China knows it can't do it now. Because there's no way China could start this invasion and complete it before the election's over. And they know if Donald Trump wins, America's coming. America is going to be there quick, fast, and in a hurry to help the people of Taiwan. They know if Harris wins on November 5th, you guarantee November 6th, Taiwan's in trouble. But we'll talk about that again. We'll get more in depth than that next week, because I'll show you I'll show you actually what's going on over there as of today and how China is getting ready to do exactly that. But we'll talk about that next week. So, guys, until then, as always, it's always a pleasure. I'm sorry I didn't have the camera going. I know most of you don't need to see my face anyways. But I promise next week I'll have it up and running. So until then, guys, I love each and every one of you guys. Stay positive. I think it's going to be okay, especially in the city of Meriden. I think, I'm going to try to get Brian Daniels on, but it probably won't happen until after the election. We'll try to get him on. I don't want to have him on during the campaign time, just because obviously I got to do some disclaimers and stuff like that for when I have it on. So I'll try to get him on for after, and I don't think he'll have an issue coming on. But we'll touch base with that. I'll start getting that in the works. But until next time, guys, I'll see you next Sunday, 7:00. I will be here with you. Until then, I love you, and I will talk to you all later.
And a million faces formed together, made for elevation. And a soldier won't surrender faith. It's like a fire that never burns to embers. The voice of the unheard. Love is the answer.
I gotta speak and believe it, that's how I feel inside.
I can't sit here quiet.
You can take my heart, you can take my